What's the weirdest thing you've seen happen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? When I was in about first grade, my best friend at the time had a lot of temper tantrums. We were having a sleepover and I fell asleep in her bedroom. In the middle of the night, I woke up in a different bed with her father. I was so confused, but he explained that she had a temper tantrum and her mom went to sleep in her bed with her, so they moved me to the guest room. I was young and didn't understand that's not normal that he was sleeping in the same bed as me. Just him and me. I told my parents when I went home the next day and they were extremely concerned, asking me if he touched me, etc. I was highly confused because my pure innocent mind didn't understand the concept of that. Lol. Now as an adult I'm like, why didn't they just move me to the other room? Why did the dad have to get in bed with me? Lol. They're truly good people and nothing happened, but it's weird. At every meal, my ex's parents would set a plate on the table for the dog. The dog would sit in a chair and eat at the table with the people. More of a date story. Was on a date with a guy who was cooking dinner for me and his dog took a giant horse piss in the living room. I jumped up, a bit panicked, trying to get the guy's attention to what just happened. The guy didn't even look up when he said, "Oh yeah, she does that sometimes," and that was it. I asked him if there was a towel and disinfectant I could use to help clean it up and the guy says, "I'll just throw some Febreze on it after dinner." I suddenly realized the musty smell I noticed earlier wasn't from his cool and rustic cabin being under a canopy of trees, or that the floor in the same location that bowed when you stepped over it was because it was old. Ate dinner at a table that was couple feet away from the dog toilet. Left. Fucking gross. Went with a few friends to one of their family's houses for a birthday party when I was like 15 or 16. We smoked weed, swam, and had a great old time. After eating we settled in to watch a horror movie and at some point I looked around me and everyone in that family was sitting in the same crisscross applesauce position and slowly rocking back and forth while watching TV. Definitely not the weirdest thing on this thread by far, but something about it was extremely creepy. They were nice as hell, though. A similar thread popped up a few years ago and I will never forget the family that shared milk. If you didn't finish it, it got poured into someone else's glass or the friend guessed. For some reason, drinking someone else's backwash milk is repulsive to me and has remained a memorable post. 15 years ago. Visit a friend house who live in San Francisco around 3rd Street, bad neighborhood area. Upon entering, passed by the kitchen, gas stove flame was in full blast, not cooking anything, no vent. You can literally see a big burn hole in the ceiling all the way through the second floor room. His mom was upstairs, one of those rooms far away from the bottom floor kitchen, watching TV in full blast. Long story short, they are basically using their gas stove as a centralized heater for the whole house. I'm a certified fire safety director at my work. This almost gives me a heart attack. Went to a sleepover at this girl's house and her mom was obsessively taking pictures of us all night. At one point, we were watching a movie and my friend passed out and her mom, I shit you not, pulls out a huge newscast type heavy-duty camera and starts recording her daughter sleeping for a solid 5 minutes. I have trouble sleeping and so that night when us kids were in the bedroom to sleep, I was on the floor, just staring at the wall in the dark. I was facing away from the door, laying on my side. I hear the door creak, some footsteps and then the darkness of the room lit with a sudden flash. I got up just in time to see the door close. I know it was her mom taking pics of us. The weirdest part to me is that it was about 3 a.m. when that the girl's mom either had an alarm or just stayed up that late and waited. Not really weird I guess, but first time in my husband's parents' house, just a friend at the time, I got to see what a hoarder house looked like. It wasn't even a well-known term condition back then, so it just really shocked me seeing the giant mounds of stuff everywhere and having to navigate through it all. His room was clean, the rest of the house, not so much. Found out my best friend thought the toilet seat was for kids. He would straight up sit on the rim of the toilet and poop until I found out when we were in college at 22. Family had like styrofoam bricks next to the couch in the living room for the explicit purpose of throwing at the TV if they didn't like the show, or if a character said something stupid. I walked into my GFS living room and out of nowhere their chocolate lab, from outside, jumps through an open window and lands on the couch. I just froze and her son's like, "Oh, he does that." This was in Florida. My best friend walks around completely naked. We have been friends for 25 years and it doesn't bother me. I'm used to it, but it gets weird when she invites me, my husband and toddlers over for dinner. "Hey girl, your house, your rules. But since husband and kids are coming, can you put some clothes on?" "Sure, no problem. Don't worry about the bed bugs, they don't hurt that much." I had a friend in HS. We're still friends today actually. His mom was a hoarder. There were little pathways throughout the house but it was filled, from floor to ceiling, with junk. In the hallway to the bedrooms, she had stacked every newspaper she ever got. They were tied up in bundles. When you walked in that hallway he would caution to not touch the papers because if a row fell, it would take a couple hours to dig yourself out. My family were very comfortable and my mom always babysat lots of kids from around the neighborhood. Basically her place was just where the kids hung out. Once there was an emergency with my dad and my mom really needed somebody to watch me overnight and I wound up with one of the families that she babysat for. They were really nice people and I was close friends with their kids obviously because they were at my house every day. It was a new experience though. This was the first time I'd ever seen people living in real poverty. I was kind about it and I didn't say anything, but parts of it were a real shock to me. The toilet didn't work, but they had just continued to use it to the point that it was piled up to the seat. We had to unscrew the light bulb to turn off the lights because the switch would shock you if you touched it. I felt really bad for them. It was just a real eye-opener for me as a kid and it gave me a much better understanding of exactly why my mom babysat and fed all those kids. Was about 9 or 10. Playing with some action figures with a friend in his room which had its own bathroom. He goes in to take a shit and then when he's done he yells out, "Mom, come wipe me." He was otherwise like any other kid in the early 90s. I babysat for a family on occasion and the kids would always ask for a cool cup and I had no clue what it was. They asked for them constantly but were too little to really describe them enough for me to understand. I mentioned it to the mom in passing one day and she started laughing and cut the tops off of some bell peppers and took out the seeds, filled the peppers with tap water. The kids went nuts over them like there were treats. It was really weird to me that drinking water out of bell peppers was a thing to beg for on the regular. Stayed at a friend's house when I was probably 10 or 11, and we had a sleepover one night, and we were up really late playing games and just talking. Around 3-4 a.m., his dad comes in, frantic, saying that he heard someone breaking in upstairs, and that we needed to leave immediately. Anyways, we walk out of the house, and he tells the neighbor that they need to leave too. The neighbor looked extremely worried, and pulled her phone out. We drive to a place and he gets us some food, and eventually an ambulance comes, and so does the neighbor along with it, because apparently the father was schizophrenic and having an episode. There was really no break-in. Obviously my friend now knows this, but back then, we genuinely believed him. Growing up in rural East England, had a friend who lived on a working farm. They had the stereotypical big English farmhouse, lovely old place, no flat floors or straight walls anywhere. Anyway, downstairs was an interesting layout. They had a room that was almost hidden away that you could easily miss unless you knew it was there or noticed it from outside. So, this room, I only ever went in once, maybe twice in many years of being friends and going over their house quite a lot. It was their Christmas room. It has decorations up all year round, and during the year when they bought presents they'd wrap them and just put in the room and leave them there until Christmas. It was awesome in a sense though. A whole room for this is great. Often when it came to Christmas time they'd forgotten what something was that they got for another family member. Edit reading the rest of the thread. This is so tame and boring compared to the dog fucking mother or the cake and soup one. Edit 2. Thank you to everyone for the upvotes. Nice to see it's still getting read. Thinking back about it, and without wanting to sound like I'm tooting my own horn with all the absolutely heartbreaking posts in here, I guess I posted this as almost a break from them. God bless everyone and peace to all three. When I was 18 I started dating this fresh off the boat Russian girl. Went over to her parents' house and they had a giant dildo on the living room shelf next to a collection of Nazi knives. If you did something stupid, you got hit with the dildo. Found out later they found the dildo on the streets of Brooklyn. They assured me they cleaned it really well. Wound up living with them for about 6 months and was actually a lot of fun. Grew up in a trailer park where I don't know any kids that weren't abusing others neglected. One day I walked into my best friend's living room to find a room full of about 15 boys ranging in age from 6-16 jerking off together to a porn playing on the TV. Also my best friend and his brothers and other kids used to watch their mom have sex with her affairs from under the bedroom door. I'll be the weird family. My dad is a doctor and one day my friend came over who had a totally blackened toenail from getting stepped on by a baseball cleat. No problem, my dad says, just some blood underneath the toenail. We can relieve the pain by puncturing a hole in the toenail and letting the blood flow out. Well, he proceeds to get out a Dremel tiny drill, sterilize a new drill bit, and drills a small hole in my friend's toenail. Blood shoots out of the hole into the air. My friend and I were screaming and laughing the entire time. It worked. He was instantly relieved of his pain. My friend asked if this was a normal occurrence in the house. I told him that my dad has always been the go-to for caring for friends, neighbors, etc., but this did indeed take the cake for being the best procedure he's done in the house. I went to a summer camp as a kid and made a best friend. She invited me over to her house and of course, little 13-year-old me was so excited. I was not so excited after her brother had sex with his girlfriend. With his door open. His room was right next to hers. Had a friend whose family lived on a huge property and kept cows for the property tax exemption, not odd. He told me to come by and get some purple ringers he collected for me. Invited me in to meet his parents, and I swear to God, there was a full-size cow chilling on one of their couches in the living room. That sight was way more wild than any of the hallucinations later experienced. Really nice people though lol. My friend and I all went to our rich friend's house to play. Then they said they needed to do something and would be back in an hour. So we all just played in the room and waited. Turns out the entire family had lunch and just locked us up in the room so they wouldn't have to feed us. Once we found out, we all felt hurt and decided to never play at their house again. In 6th grade, my first ever sleepover, I went to the bathroom and came out to him blasting porn in the living room, and I had never seen porn before. We watch it for like 10 minutes and he says, "I'm so horny, I gotta jack off bro." Then he started cranking his dick right there in front of me and I was shocked. The video was some fat dude cucking another guy and making him cry. I'll never forget that. My friend's mom told him to masturbate later today, just casually, like it was a regular thing to say to your kids. He was just like, "Yeah sure." When I was younger, I was best friends with two brothers from Jamaica. One of the days they asked me to stay over so we could play some Atari after we finished playing outside. We came home 12 minutes after their curfew, so their dad, who was extremely calm, told us to sit in the living room. I sat in there with my two friends and they were super quiet, which was a bit weird until their dad walked in with a belt and beat the living shit out of them. I shit myself, not literally, because I thought I was in for a beating, but he didn't hit me, which was a huge relief. After the beating, their dad asked if I would like some carrot juice while my friends just went back to normal and set up their Atari like nothing happened. I was sat on the sofa wondering what the fuck just went on. Roaches crawling around in daylight out in the open. I wouldn't sit or eat anything the 3 times I went over. His entire family seemed to think it was normal to have roaches where he was. I had family in the same building and their house was almost sterile. When I was 7, I went over to play with a new friend and she asked if I wanted a snack. I said sure, and we went into their playroom where there was a mini fridge just stacked with candy, full bars of everything, and she casually tossed me a pack of Rolos. Now, the house was a manufactured home, not a trailer purse, but definitely not like the usual house either. I know this doesn't indicate how much money the family had, but this was not in an upscale neighborhood or house. I marveled at A, the largest amount of candy I have still to this day ever seen, and B, the fact that she and her siblings all just had free access to it at such young ages. She was surprised at my surprise and asked what did I keep in my snack fridge. I told her I didn't have one of those, and then it was her turn to be absolutely gobsmacked at the idea that I didn't have a mini fridge full of candy just at my disposal and whim. My GF and her little brother were staying at a sort of foster home that was absolutely filthy. They knew it was, but weren't going to complain about it since it was still better than their last situation. But the parents there had 2 little boys of their own, and it's their normal. I feel bad that those boys will either realize their home is disgusting and never invite anyone over, or have someone over who then embarrasses them or doesn't want to be their friend anymore because of it. Slept over at a friend's when I was around 10. She was the only girl in her family, and had 5 brothers whose ages ranged from like 4 to 15. Everything about my friend's room sleeping situation was normal. But her brother's room was bizarre. They shared one big room, with 3 bunk beds. Each mattress a fitted sheet, a pillow, and nothing else. No top sheets, no blankets, no comforters. Also, the boys didn't have pajamas. They all just slept in the clothes they had worn that day with their shirts tucked into their pants, and belts on, too. Their room didn't have a door, and neither did their connected bathroom or their closets. Turns out they were fundamentalist Christians, and the boys' setup was meant to prevent masturbation. My house, but looking back it's unusual. My dad was a doctor and it was not uncommon for him to take a patient's blood on the way home and store it in the fridge next to the orange juice overnight. Then take it to work the next morning. Can't do that these days of course, but the 70s was pretty wild. One of the first times I met my husband's family, I was over at their house and husband gestured for me to sit down and be comfortable. Their house was really very cluttered. Not quite hoarder cluttered, but close. They had a couple of couches facing each other and then some other chairs. Not knowing the rules, I sat on one of the couches, which had a lot of stuffed teddy bears on it. OMG, you would think I had sat down on live bears. There were probably 20-30 small medium stuffed bears on this couch. Husband's mother and twin brother both visibly reacted as if I had damaged the bears. Not antique bears either. That was when I was told that the couch was for the bears, and only for the bears, and that no one was allowed to sit on the bears' couch. Just the bears. The bears all had little beaded necklaces with their names on them to tell them apart because they were all the same brand and style. Everything was always relatively normal at this one friend's house, until evening. At which point his mom, mid-40s at the time, we were 9-10 years old, would always change into an extremely short, nearly transparent lace negligee with nothing on underneath it. She acted like nothing was out of the ordinary, did chores, watched TV, cooked, etc., all while we tried not to stare. At one point we were sitting at the kitchen table trading Yu-Gi-Oh cards and she was baking cookies. When they were done she bent over to get them from the oven, and due to the extremely short negligee we saw her whole ass and pussy. My friend was completely unfazed. I was fucking speechless. It's also why I'm into MILFs as an adult.